Hi everyone, welcome to this year's Live Pure conference. My name is Jeric Araniego, and in this talk, we're gonna answer the question, what does masturbation do to men? I know masturbation is a very sensitive topic, but it still has to be discussed not only because most of us have struggled or still struggle with it, but also because of its long-term destructive effects. So first of all, I'd like to emphasize the truth that it's very possible to overcome this insidious habit. It can definitely be stopped. The simple reason why many people fail to do so is that they're not maximizing all the means at their disposal. That is why today we're going to talk about the 7 effective means by which we can destroy the said vice. But before that, we'll start with the 7 harmful effects of masturbation in order to discourage everyone from doing it. First, masturbation fosters impure thoughts. This is self-explanatory. Nobody who does it thinks about the moon and the stars. Everyone who does it is without a doubt fantasizing about sex and using the flesh of another human being for their own pleasure. And when habitually done, it drowns a person's mind and heart deep into the filth of lust to the point of almost no escape. Second, masturbation brings a deep attachment to pleasure. Whether done individually or with another person, sexual gratification can be so addictive that the very first experience of it may arouse a stubborn, persistent desire to experience more. Masturbation is like a quicksand that sucks down anybody who steps into it until that person becomes completely submerged and covered in darkness. From the words of St. Augustine, lust indulged became habit, and habit unresisted became necessity. Third, masturbation leads to other sexual immoralities. It just doesn't end there. When the intensity of pleasure from one sexual activity starts to diminish, the lustful person begins to desire more depraved acts to heighten again the sensation. The womanizer didn't become a sex addict overnight. The adulterer didn't just become unfaithful all of a sudden. The serial rapist didn't become an evil maniac in just a few months. They've all undergone a long step-by-step process of sexual perversion, which certainly includes an addiction to masturbation. Fourth, masturbation makes us objectify and dehumanize other people. Whenever the man who is addicted to masturbation encounters a very attractive woman, he has a much stronger inclination to fantasize about her and think of her as a sex object rather than a person with dignity. Why? Simply because he has long been training his mind to think that way. He has long been allowing the demon of lust to penetrate and corrupt his heart. That's how dreadful this vice is. It reduces and sees other people as mere objects of pleasure. Fifth, masturbation makes us commit adultery in our heart. St. Augustine teaches that there's not much difference between the willful contemplation of an act and the act itself. The man who intentionally imagines having sex with a particular woman will surely do so in reality if he's given a chance. That is why our Savior himself said that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. 6. Masturbation can weaken our faith. Our beliefs can regulate our actions, or our actions can influence our beliefs. We either allow our faith to direct our behavior, or we let our behavior ruin our faith. Many lukewarm Christians eventually renounce their faith not because of rational reasons, but because of their deep attachment to pleasure. Their faithlessness is based not on sound logic, but on their love for self-indulgence. They'd rather reject God's laws to relieve the guilt coming from a sinful lifestyle than change themselves to live in accordance with the church. In short, their addiction fosters their unbelief. That is why Venerable Fulton Sheen declared, "If you do not live what you believe, you will end up believing what you live." Last, and the most alarming consequence of all, masturbation destroys our soul. It's a grievous sin that can eternally separate us from God. No profound explanation is needed here. Everything we've discussed so far is already enough to show that masturbation is truly a deadly sin. Our Lady of Fatima herself said that more souls go to hell because of sins of the flesh than for any other reason. The habit of masturbation makes us selfish, impure, lustful, unfaithful, and offensive to God. The more we commit this sin, the harder it is to stop. As Venerable Louis of Granada asked, "If you are now baffled by a year or two of sinful habits, how can you resist their strength at the end of 10 years? It is of the utmost importance, therefore, that we begin to extinguish the fires of lust before they grow bigger and bigger until they become uncontrollable. So how are we going to do it? What are the spiritual weapons that we have to fight against lustful temptations? Are there practical ways to save ourselves from thoughts of impurity? To answer these questions, we're now going to move on to the 7 things that we must consistently do to overcome this enticing vice. First, we must humble ourselves and acknowledge our weakness in the struggle against lust. We wouldn't be able to solve a problem unless we admit that there is a problem. Purity requires humility. The saints agree that humility is the mother of all virtues. A disease, whether physical or spiritual, cannot be cured just by ignoring it. It must first be acknowledged and diagnosed before it is treated. Second, we should always make use of the sacraments. We can't resist all the devil's temptations on our own. Without divine assistance, it's impossible for us to win against the army of darkness. It is for this reason that we must regularly obtain the transformative grace of God by frequently going to confession and receiving the Eucharist worthily. As St. John Bosco advised, you can fly to heaven on the wings of confession and communion. There's no way around it. The spiritual warfare can never be won without the sacraments. Third, we must have a healthy prayer life. The prayerful man is always thinking about God, and the person who always thinks about God is undoubtedly much stronger and more resistant against temptations. That is why, according to St. Alphonsus Liguori, if you pray, you are positive of saving your soul. If you do not pray, you are just as positive of losing your soul. Fourth, we must avoid all near occasions of sin. And I would like to emphasize 3 common examples: idleness, impure images, and ungodly acquaintances. We must escape from idleness because idle hands are the devil's playground. One of our top priorities is to always spend our time on things that are productive. We must keep away from impure images because they can quickly entice us to commit the sin of lust. This includes all pornographic websites, erotic magazines, sexy films, and the like. We must run away from ungodly acquaintances because they can easily influence us to be ungodly. Exposure to them is very dangerous to our soul. In St. John Bosco's words, fly from bad companions as from the bite of a poisonous snake. Fifth, we must make time for spiritual reading. The reason for this is also simple: to acquire virtue and wisdom by learning from the examples and teachings of the saints. The reading of good books gives us an abundance of intellectual and spiritual nourishment. Saint Josemaria Escriva was clear when he wrote, "Don't neglect your spiritual reading. Reading has made many saints." Aside from the Bible, I highly recommend 3 other spiritual books: Preparation for Death by St. Alphonsus Liguori, The Sinner's Guide by Venerable Louis of Granada, and Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. All of these are downloadable online for free. 6. We must regularly fast. Our discipline in one area of our life can be carried over into another. When we habitually abstain from delicious food, for example, our discipline to abstain from sexual gratification is also strengthened. Fasting exercises the virtue of self-denial, and our ability to deny ourselves our favorite snacks can also be used to deny ourselves our sinful desires. Furthermore, it's an obvious truth that overeating leads to inactivity. Gluttony precedes sloth. Once idleness is caused by a full stomach, that's when the devil begins to bombard us with lustful thoughts. This is where the power of fasting comes in. It can prevent all of this from happening. St. Augustine was right when he said that fasting quenches the fires of lust and kindles the true light of chastity. Lastly, we must avoid wrestling with impure thoughts. They are not like thoughts of pride which we can brush aside by remembering our weaknesses. Lust is the vice that can't be fought head-on. It can only be overcome by running away. It's so irresistibly tempting that rationality leaves when lust enters the mind. It's not something that we can talk ourselves out of. It's something that we must keep ourselves out of. As one proverb says, "The heart won't crave what the eyes do not see." In the battle against lust, the one who retreats wins. In the war against impurity, victory is gained by cowards. From the words of St. Alphonsus Liguori, it is useful to combat other bad thoughts face to face, but not thoughts of impurity. These 7 pieces of advice can surely lead us to spiritual victory when we follow it religiously. I myself have experienced firsthand the effectiveness of each one of them. Now, let's have a quick recap of everything we've talked about. First and foremost, the habit of masturbation can certainly be overcome. We must reject the belief that it's perfectly normal, because it's not. We can discourage ourselves from doing it by always remembering that it does nothing other than pollute our mind, corrupt our heart, and destroy our soul. And in order for us to be victorious in our battle against it, we must have the virtue of humility, make use of the sacraments, have a healthy prayer life, avoid all near occasions of sin, make time for spiritual reading, regularly fast, and keep running away from impure thoughts. Alright, so that's all for now. I hope you've learned something new today. May we all succeed in living a life of humility and chastity. Thank you for watching. God bless and stay safe, everyone.